The Galactic Union's emissary towered over the delegation chamber, its translucent exoskeleton refracting the overhead lights into shimmering rainbows. Its multifaceted eyes scanned the room, settling on the human representative seated at the far end of the polished table. A moment of heavy silence hung over the assembly, the weight of impending doom shared among every being present. "We are losing," the emissary declared in a resonant, clicking voice, its translator converting the sounds into English. "The Trinari Empire has overrun 3 sectors in as many weeks. They will not stop until all free systems bow or burn." President Elaine Ward sat motionless, her hands clasped tightly before her, her face a mask of measured calm. The room was filled with representatives of Earth's fledgling space coalition, a mix of military officials, scientists, and diplomats. They had never imagined their first formal engagement with the broader galaxy would be under such circumstances. Humanity's entry into the Galactic Union had been cautious and tentative, marked by skepticism and ridicule from older, more advanced species. Now, it seemed, their obscurity had become an asset. The Trinari had not yet deemed Earth worth conquering. That slim mercy, however, would not last. Admiral David Armitage shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Why come to us? Humanity's fleets are minuscule. Our weapons barely scratch the surface of your technology. What could we possibly offer that the Union doesn't already possess?" The emissary's antennae flicked, a gesture of unease. "You underestimate yourselves. The Trinari are unrelenting because they see weakness in diversity. They exploit predictable patterns, standard tactics, and shared doctrines. You humans are an anomaly, unconventional, unpredictable, untested. We require that unpredictability. A fresh perspective may provide the edge we need." Ward exhaled slowly, her sharp gaze cutting through the room. Unpredictable doesn't win wars. Resources do. Strategy does. How are we supposed to contribute anything substantial without sacrificing ourselves in the process? Dr. Helena E., head of the Terran Biodiversity Institute, leaned forward, her expression contemplative. "Perhaps," she said softly, "it isn't what we can build, but what we already have." Her voice was measured, yet the weight of her words drew the room's attention. Ward raised an eyebrow. "Explain?" Dr. E. hesitated, her fingers tapping against the table. "Earth is unique in one regard among all the planets in Union space: its ecosystems. Our planet has evolved predators, apex species, and survival mechanisms that are completely foreign to the galaxy at large. If we can harness that, weaponize it, we might offer something no one else can." The room erupted in murmurs, the air thick with disbelief and tension. Admiral Armitage's brow furrowed deeply. "You're suggesting we turn lions, wolves, and what? Sharks into soldiers? This isn't a science fiction novel, Doctor. We're facing fleets, plasma weapons, and orbital bombardments. What you're proposing is madness." "Madness," he countered, her voice gaining strength, "is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The Union's strategies are failing. Their technology, as advanced as it is, can't adapt quickly enough to the Trinari's aggression. But nature adapts. It evolves. It fights tooth and claw for survival in ways no machine or training program ever could. Earth's predators are the result of millions of years of perfection and survival. If we enhance them, augment their instincts and capabilities, they could become a force the Trinari wouldn't anticipate." President Ward's lips pressed into a thin line as she absorbed Yi's words. Her mind churned with the implications. "And how do we ensure this force doesn't turn against us?" Dr. E met her gaze evenly. "Control, conditioning, genetic safeguards. It won't be easy, but it's possible. The question is whether we're willing to take that step." Admiral Armitage shook his head. "Even if it works, there's no guarantee the Union would accept such a solution. They'd see it as barbaric, even monstrous." The emissary clicked its mandibles, drawing attention once more. "The Union is desperate. The Trinari do not fight with honor. They have unleashed bioweapons, enslaved entire populations, and consumed worlds with planetary harvesters. If humanity can offer a weapon that turns the tide, ethics will bend. Ward rose from her seat, her posture commanding the room's attention. This isn't just about the Trinari or the Union. It's about ensuring humanity survives in a galaxy that sees us as expendable. If we do nothing, Earth will fall when the Union collapses. And if we fail, at least we'll fall fighting. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, she turned to E. You have authorization to proceed. Use what resources you need, but keep it contained. If this backfires, the blood will be on all our hands. Over the next months, humanity's secret project consumed its brightest minds and boldest engineers. The task was monumental. Identify Earth's deadliest predators, enhance their physical and cognitive capabilities, and integrate them into a combat framework. From the depths of the oceans to the densest jungles, apex species were captured, studied, and transformed. Genetic modifications amplified strength, speed, and endurance. Neural interfaces allowed rudimentary coordination with human handlers. Ethical boundaries blurred, then shattered under the weight of necessity. Admiral Armitage visited the project site once, unable to suppress a shiver as he watched a pack of enhanced wolves, each the size of a small car, move with unnerving precision through an obstacle course. They were faster than any drone, more adaptable than any programmed AI. Yet their glowing eyes and unnatural stillness when idle made his stomach churn. Do you think this will work? He asked Dr. E as they observed the scene from a reinforced observation deck. It has to, she replied simply. Her face was drawn, her voice devoid of its earlier confidence. The weight of what they were doing, what they were creating, seemed to press heavily upon her. The first test deployment came sooner than anticipated. A Trinari assault force had breached a key Union stronghold, its defenses crumbling under relentless pressure. Humanity's predators were sent in under the cover of night, dropped silently onto the battlefield by cloaked shuttles. The Union's generals had protested vehemently, but desperation won out over decorum. Reports from the field painted a grim yet astonishing picture. Trinari soldiers, accustomed to calculated, technology-driven warfare, were utterly unprepared for the primal fury that descended upon them. Packs of wolves tore through their ranks, coordinated and relentless. Lions, armored and enhanced, broke through fortified positions with terrifying ease. In subterranean tunnels, venomous snakes and swarms of predatory insects wreaked havoc, bypassing traditional defenses entirely. By dawn, the stronghold was secure. The Trinari had fled, their forces decimated. But the battlefield was a scene of primal carnage, a stark reminder of the price of survival. In the aftermath, President Ward sat alone in her office, the weight of their victory pressing down on her. She reviewed the footage, her expression unreadable. It was a victory, yes, but one that left scars on the soul. What had they unleashed upon the galaxy, and upon themselves? The air hung thick with tension in the underground command center, where every flicker of the holographic battlefield map seemed to cast fresh shadows over the room's already grim occupants. Admiral David Armitage stood at the center, his imposing frame taut as his steely gaze swept over the disarray of glowing markers indicating Union losses. Behind him, the hum of equipment and the murmured voices of strategists filled the space like an unwelcome reminder of their precarious position. Dr. Helena E. entered briskly, her lab coat discarded for combat fatigues that did little to hide the exhaustion in her sharp features. She carried a tablet in one hand, the data on its screen an overwhelming collection of casualty reports and predator deployment analytics. When her eyes met Armitage's, she didn't bother with pleasantries. We're losing sectors faster than anticipated. The Trinari's adaptability is accelerating. Armitage didn't look away from the map. Define accelerating. They've deployed new tactical drones that identify predator movements before they strike. It's not enough to stop us completely, but it's throwing our formations into chaos. If this continues, she hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. We'll lose. The bluntness of her statement drew the attention of several nearby officers, but Armitage seemed unfazed. And what's your solution, Doctor? Yi's fingers tightened on the tablet. We need to escalate. predators alone won't win this war anymore. Not without an edge. I've been developing something, but it's untested. The Admiral turned to her, his expression unreadable. Explain? The neural implants we've been using to enhance coordination and aggression. They're operating within safety thresholds, she said, though the term safety carried little weight in this context. I've devised a variant that pushes beyond those limits. It will boost their cognitive processing and responsiveness exponentially. And the risks? Armitage asked, though he already suspected the answer. It could overtax their systems, she admitted, her voice softening, potentially leading to breakdowns, erratic behavior, or even death. But if we don't do this, the Trinari will overwhelm us. The Admiral's silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken calculations. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but firm. Make the preparations. He hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. David, it's not up for debate, he interrupted. If we lose this battle, we lose the war. I'll take responsibility for the fallout. She nodded reluctantly and turned to leave, her mind already racing with the steps required to implement the enhancements. As she passed through the command center, she caught snippets of hushed conversations, words like desperation and gamble hanging in the air. They weren't wrong. Hours later, the Predators were assembled in the subterranean deployment bays, their massive forms silhouetted against the cold glow of containment barriers. Wolves paced within their enclosures, their luminescent eyes scanning their handlers with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Jaguars crouched low, their sleek bodies coiled with latent energy. Lions rested on their haunches, exuding a quiet confidence that belied their lethality. He moved among them, her team working swiftly to install the upgraded neural implants. The process was delicate, requiring precision and an almost inhuman level of calm. Each predator was sedated, their breathing slow and steady as the enhancements were integrated into their neural pathways. Yi's hands trembled only slightly as she made the final adjustments, her thoughts a chaotic mix of fear and determination. By the time the last implant was in place, the predators were beginning to stir, their movements slower, more deliberate. One of the handlers, a young woman with wide eyes and a shaky voice, asked, "Will they know what we've done?" He didn't answer immediately. She watched as a lioness rose to her feet, her piercing gaze locking onto E with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "I think they already do," she murmured. The first deployment of the enhanced predators was both a triumph and a disaster. On the Eastern Front, the wolves struck first, their newfound speed and precision carving through Trinari defenses like a scythe through wheat. Their enhanced coordination allowed them to execute complex maneuvers, flanking enemy units with an efficiency that defied belief. Soldiers in the trenches cheered as the tide seemed to turn, their morale bolstered by the sheer ferocity of humanity's allies. But in Sector 7, something went wrong. The Jaguars, tasked with clearing an enemy encampment, had succeeded initially, their augmented capabilities overwhelming the Trinari's automated turrets. Then, without warning, they turned on their handlers. The live feed captured the moment in chilling detail. One Jaguar, its coat shimmering with black and gold, lunged at a handler who had been issuing commands. The others followed, their movements erratic, their eyes wild. In the command center, Ian Armitage watched the footage in stunned silence. "Shut it down," Armitage barked, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. "I'm trying," he said, her fingers flying across her console. "The neural link is unresponsive. They've overridden the control parameters." "How is that even possible?" he demanded. "They're learning," she said, her voice tinged with both awe and dread. "Faster than we anticipated." On the ground, Union forces scrambled to contain the rogue predators, deploying tranquilizers and stun devices. But the Jaguars' enhanced reflexes made them nearly impossible to subdue. It wasn't until a nearby unit diverted heavy artillery fire that the situation was brought under control, though at a devastating cost. When the dust settled, he stood before Armitage in the command center, her expression stricken. "This is on me," she said. "I pushed too far." Armitage stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "You did what was necessary." But we can't afford another incident like this. Pull the enhanced predators from the field until we understand what went wrong. And if the Trinari press their advantage in the meantime? He asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze hardened. Then we find another way. As he left the room, she couldn't shake the image of the jaguar's eyes, the intelligence behind them, the spark of something far beyond mere survival instinct. She had given them an edge, but in doing so, she had also given them a choice. And that realization terrified her. Outside, the war raged on, the cries of the wounded mingling with the distant thunder of artillery. In the cold light of the command center, Armitage stared at the holographic map, his mind racing with contingencies. They had bought themselves time, but it was a fragile, fleeting victory. And somewhere in the depths of his thoughts, a question lingered, a question he dared not voice. What happens when the predators decide they no longer need humanity? The battlefield was silent now, a stark contrast to the chaos that had reigned mere hours ago. Smoke drifted lazily across the ruins of the Trinari stronghold, casting an eerie pall over the wreckage. Admiral David Armitage stood on a ridge overlooking the devastation, his boots sinking slightly into the churned soil. Around him, Union soldiers moved with cautious purpose, retrieving the wounded and cataloging the dead. The predators had retreated to their containment units, their handlers ensuring they were secured before any further complications arose. He'd seen countless battlefields in his career, but this one felt different. It wasn't just the scope of the destruction or the sheer brutality of the combat. It was the knowledge that humanity had unleashed something no one, not even themselves, fully understood. As he scanned the horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. Dr. Helena E. approached, her face pale and drawn. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by a haunted look that spoke volumes. In her hand, she held a tablet, its screen filled with grim data. Without a word, she passed it to him. Armitage glanced at the display. Casualty reports, predator performance metrics, disruptor analysis. His gaze lingered on one line. Asterisk predator losses, 37%. Handler losses, 12%. Asterisk he handed the tablet back, his expression unreadable. Was it worth it? Her voice was barely above a whisper. We won. That's not what I asked. He hesitated, her grip on the tablet tightening. We stopped the Trinari here. Their disruptor slowed us down, but we adapted faster. Without the predators, we wouldn't be standing here. But the cost, she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Armitage sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. War isn't clean, Doctor. You knew that when we started this. I thought I understood, she said, her tone bitter. But seeing it firsthand, watching those creatures fight, die, and turn on their own when the disruptors hit them, it's different. Different or not, it's reality now, Armitage replied. The Union sees us as saviors, but they're also afraid. And they should be. We've shown them what humanity is capable of. He shook her head, her voice rising with a rare spark of defiance. This isn't just about them, Admiral. It's about us. What happens when this war is over? When the predators aren't needed anymore? Do we put them down like tools we're done with? Or do we keep them, just in case? Either way, we've fundamentally changed ourselves. Before Armitage could respond, a Union emissary approached, its insectal form glinting in the dull light. The alien's multifaceted eyes reflected their images as it spoke, its translator humming softly. Admiral Armitage. Dr. E. The Union Council extends its gratitude. Your species' contributions have turned the tide of this conflict. Armitage nodded curtly. Gratitude won't win this war. What's the next move? The emissary's antennae twitched. The Trinari forces are regrouping in the Zarthex Nebula. Our analysts predict another offensive within the month. The Council hopes humanity will expand its deployment to address this threat. Expand? He interjected, her voice sharp. We've already pushed our predators to their limits. They're not machines. They need time to recover, to heal. The emissary turned to her, its tone impassive. The Council acknowledges your concerns, but necessity supersedes comfort. The Trinari will not grant us respite. and thus we cannot afford to grant it to ourselves. Armitage raised a hand, cutting off Yi's retort. We'll do what's needed. But don't mistake necessity for unlimited resources. Push too hard, and this whole strategy collapses. The emissary inclined its head slightly, though its expression, or lack thereof, revealed nothing. Understood. The council will await your report. With that, it retreated, leaving the two humans alone once more. He let out a frustrated sigh. They'll use us until we break, and then they'll blame us for breaking. Probably, Armitage admitted. But that's the nature of alliances. They're as fragile as the people or aliens involved. She gave him a sidelong glance. And what about us? Are we breaking? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out over the battlefield again, the weight of leadership pressing down on him like a physical force. We'll hold, he said at last, though his tone was more determined than confident. Because we have to. Later that evening, as the camp settled into an uneasy quiet, he sat alone in her tent, reviewing the data from the day's battle. The Predator's performance had exceeded expectations, even under the strain of the disruptors. But there were anomalies, behaviors that hadn't been programmed or predicted. Wolves coordinating without handlers. Lions retreating to protect injured packmates. Jaguars refusing to engage when faced with certain death. It was as if the animals were learning, adapting on their own. She frowned, her fingers hovering over the tablet. These weren't just enhancements, they were evolutions. And with evolution came unpredictability. The flap of her tent rustled, and she looked up to see Armitage entering, his expression grim. Got a minute? Always, she said, setting the tablet aside. He sat across from her, the lines on his face deeper than she remembered. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about what happens when this war ends. And you're right, he admitted. This can't go on forever. Even if we win, even if the Trinari are wiped out tomorrow, we've opened a door we can't close. The Union will want more. Hell, humanity will want more. There's no putting this genie back in the bottle. Yi's shoulders sagged slightly. So what do we do? Armitage leaned forward, his voice low. We plan for the endgame. When the war is over, we make sure the Predators are secured, contained if necessary. No one else gets their hands on them. Not the Union. Not even us. She studied him carefully, searching for any hint of duplicity. And what if the Union doesn't agree? What if they see the Predators as their property now? His gaze hardened. Then we remind them why they came to us in the first place. We're unpredictable, remember? For the first time that day, he allowed herself a small, weary smile. Unpredictable, right? Outside, the night was still, the stars above shimmering like distant promises. The war was far from over, but in that moment, they found a sliver of clarity. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, for better or worse. Now, it was up to them to decide what that mark would mean.